Hello everyone, my name is Heather and welcome to the channel Bookables. Today I am here to do the book recommendations tag. I've seen this video float around. Let's get into it. First up is a book that you tell people is your favorite. A lot. As a book reader, a book aficionado, I have a lot of favorites, I'm sure, as we all do. I have several. I have this one. I tell a lot of people, like, this is my current favorite, like The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I love it. It's for sure one of my favorites, as well as, I don't have any of them, they're all up there. Harry Potter, I always say, was like my first ever book love. It's still one of my favorite series of all time, with good reason, as well as literally any Taylor Jenkins Reid book. Like, I love her books. Like, they are all my favorite. I would say, like, my favorite might be Daisy Jones and the Six by her, followed very closely by Evelyn Hugo, but I do like her chick lit books as well. But those, I'd say, are like the three predominant ones I say like are my favorite for sure. Probably when I tell people, when people ask like, what are your favorite? Those are the ones I say the most. Is a book that is your guilty pleasure. So this is, it's gonna be hard. Like, you know, I don't know what guilty pleasure really is. I have guilty pleasure shows for sure. Those are like the only like 3 reality shows I watch are my guilty pleasure, like The Hills, Laguna Beach, and Jersey Shore. Those are the only 3 reality shows I've ever watched. I don't watch any other reality shows, so those are like my guilty pleasure shows. As far as books, I think I used to be kind of like any sort of steamy book was a guilty pleasure book, and now I'm like, it's kind of, you know, I love them, so there's nothing wrong with that. But I have to say the Ice Planet series by Ruby Dixon is a guilty pleasure series, strictly because there's like no plot to it. It's just 90% steam, 10% plot, if that. It's mainly about aliens and human woman getting together, and if that was something, that's something I never thought I would be into, but here I am. 2023, who am I but loving this series? It's definitely a guilty pleasure series for sure because there's not much depth to it, and I don't really care that there's not a lot of depth to it. Next up is a book that everyone loved but you didn't. Honestly, you can go to my video of authors I don't read from anymore, and a lot of those authors are ones that I don't really like that everyone else likes, like Colleen Hoover, Ruth Ware. That's just that. But for one book in particular that everyone seems to love, but I kind of don't get it, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I read that last year, and it was so hyped up, and I still do not get the hype. The movie came out, I tried to watch the movie, couldn't even get into it, couldn't finish it, so that's one that like I just don't get. Next up is a book you read the fastest. Now, I don't read fast. I used to read very quickly before kids. Well, no, even when my son was at a good age with somewhat independent before I had my second child, I could read pretty, like I could do 3 books in a week, which I think is still pretty good. Now, it's like really lucky if I can do 3 books in a week. It's usually around 1 or 2. So I don't read quickly anymore. But one, I plan on reading because it's like 200 pages, but one that I read very, very quickly, and that is What Have We Done by Alex Finlay. I just read that last month, and I read it so quickly because the chapters were very short. It was like an over 300 page plus book, and I still ended up, I read it so quickly. You think it would be amazing. I still ended up giving it a 3 out of 5. Yes, it read very quickly, but it wasn't that great, but that's the last book I remember reading that I just flew through. That we have kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, a book that deserves more hype. Like, this is one that I think, like, you know, that doesn't get enough hype. For that, I'm gonna go with The Kitchen Front by Jennifer Ryan. I really enjoy this book. It's about 3 women in World War II that live in England that has to deal with rations, and it's all about their rations and competition with that and having to provide for the family with the rations. I loved it. It's a great historical fiction, and I don't read a ton of historical fiction, honestly. I just don't usually jive well with it, but for this one, I really, really enjoyed it. A book that is becoming either a movie or a TV show. There are so many that I don't even keep up with them anymore. One that, is it coming out this year? No, it's coming out very soon. Is it already up? I don't know. And that is another Taylor Jenkins Reid. Her books are getting adapted, and I'm not mad about it because I did enjoy Daisy Jones and the Six adaptation. I didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to, but I still really enjoyed it and think it was a solid adaptation. So, another one of her books is becoming, oh gosh, a show, a movie. I should do better research. But either way, this is the one love triangle I still am totally up in the air about. Like, I'm happy with the way the book ended. I feel definitive about how I'm happy with the way it ended. I feel good about it. But if it would end a completely different way, I'd also be okay with that as well. I'm usually not a lover of love triangles. Like, I am always in one camp and I stick to it. Like Team Angel, Team Edward, you know, like I don't ever sway from those camps. But this is the one book that I was like, by the end of it, I still don't know. So I'm very excited for it. I don't even know what platform it's coming on. I don't know much about it. Like I think I used to be really invested into adaptations, and then now lately, and then I'd say the last few years, my love of them has kind of waned because honestly, there's been a lot of really bad ones, but there has been a few that have been decent. So I gotta be positive at some point. Next up is a book that you reread the most. So I don't reread a lot. I just don't. I think it's because I'm always like, I have 50,000 books to read, so I don't have time to reread. The only books I could say for sure that I have reread the most, for sure, is the Harry Potter series. And this is when I was younger. I started reading Harry Potter when I was like 12, 13, and I've probably read each of them like probably 10 times each. I listened to the audiobooks in the last few years. I actually need to do that again here soon. So that is a series for sure I've reread the most. Now, another book that I have come to time and time again is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. It's like my favorite romance, and I will times pick it up and just kind of flip through it and reread sections of it because I love it so much, but I'm not a big rereader. I don't know, should I change that? I don't know. Book from a genre you don't typically read. Now, this, every time I answer a question like that, it gets harder and harder because I expand my genres ever so slightly every single year. Like 5 years ago, if you would have said I would be reading mostly adult fiction, I would have been like, no. 5 years ago, if you said I read some horror now, I'd have been like, no. So I would say for this one, horror still a genre. I dip my toes in very, very rarely. Like I maybe read 2 or 3 horror books a year. I'm okay with that because your girl's a scaredy cat. But one that I really love, Grady Hendrix is a phenomenal horror author. I love most of his books that he's written. This one I read this year. I gave it a 5 out of 5. How to Sell a Haunted House. It's about a haunted house, but it's much more deeper than that. Whew, it was intense. It's a genre I don't read from a ton, but I loved that book. Next up is a book that deserves all the hype it gets. I have so many of those. One I always think of is The House by the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This blew up a few years ago in BookTube with good reason. I always compare this book to a literal warm hug, and it is that. It's like you bottle up sunshine, you bottle up a warm hug and all the happy feelings, and you come out with this book. It deserves all the hype it gets because it's just an amazing book, so I love it. It's a book you usually recommend when asked to give a recommendation. So for this one, I thought I would break it down to genres because I do read a fair few genres every single year. I read a lot of thrillers, I read a lot of romance. Those are my two genres that I read from the most, so I'm gonna recommend some. So for thrillers, whenever somebody's like, give me a really good thriller recommendation, I will always recommend Home Before Dark by Riley Sager because it fits the haunted house bill perfectly. I think a lot of people are looking for a haunted house book. I always am, and I will always recommend that book. For romance, so complicated because there's so many romances, but for me, if I had to pick just like one good romance that I think people would like, that is funny, has a little bit of steam, has a great kind of trope to it, The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, my favorite book by them. It's a great one. It's also a great summertime read, which I think a lot of people gravitate towards romance during the summer, so I usually will pull out a Christina Lauren book, particularly this one, for a romance recommendation. So for literary fiction is another genre I read it, you know, occasionally. Baritone by Frederick Bachman will always recommend this. This is phenomenal. Also, any Taylor Jenkins Reid book is a great literary recommendation. Also kind of historical as well. Like I will always recommend Daisy Jones and the Six, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Hopefully that helps you with breaking up different genres of what I recommend people, whether it be online or in person, of what they should read. Next up is a book that has your favorite characters. I don't know. This is such a hard one. Like I have a hard time with characters. I mean, I could go Harry Potter because I grew up with those characters, yes, but I can't think of a book series or a book that I've read that I just love all the characters from, remember from. I will say, I just finished Happy Place by Emily Henry, and the characters in that were phenomenal. Like the friend group, I love that one so much, so let's just go with that one. Then we have a book that you wish you could live in. And for this, hands down, is Lord of the Rings. Mainly because I want to live in the Shire. I would love to live in the Shire. Never ever leave it. I don't have to. Maybe I can go to Rivendell or like the other elf place. But I would be good to stay away from like Mount Doom and stuff like that. That'd be good. But the Shire, like a dream. A true, true dream. It was a book you thought you would hate, but you actually ended up loving. For this one, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. That is Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I don't love this book, but I ended up liking it a lot more than I was expecting to, because this book was hyped upon hyped. Everybody and their mother talked about it, and then the length. It's like 570 pages for a romance. I was like, seriously? And while I still think it does not need to be anywhere near that long, I still enjoyed it. I enjoyed the romance, I enjoyed the characters, and I will continue on with the series. So that's one that I was like, I'm probably not gonna like this. I really don't think I will, but I ended up actually really enjoying it, much to my surprise. And then we have a book that made you cry. Any Kristen Hanna book you want to pick, like The Nightingale made me sob. The Great Alone made me sob. Firefly Lane made me sob. Coincidentally, those are the only 3 Kristen Hanna books I've read, because you've guessed it, they make me sob, and I have to be in the right emotional place to cry a lot when I read. So that is why I have not read a Christine, and that is why I have not read a Kristen Hanna book since, because they intense. And they sad. Last question we have is book you wish you could read for the first time. And I was like, you know what? I really do wish I could read Harry Potter for the first time. I remember that magical feeling I had when I was 12, and it was just such an amazing time in my life when discovering I loved that series. That would just be so much fun to visit that feeling again. When I first read Prisoner of Azkaban, and that was the very first plot twist I ever read in a book, and I was just so shocked and enamored by it. I was like, what? I remember every year being excited for the midnight release of the books, and then the movies came out. Like, I do wish I could kind of relive that again, because it was just so much fun. Like, that was my childhood kind of going into young adulthood, and it was just phenomenal. So there you have the book recommendations book tag. I hope you guys enjoyed it and got to see, I love the questions of this. It was really, really fun of what you recommend for different genres, and I really liked it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I'll leave the questions down below in case you want to answer these for yourself. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.